Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan the Reviewer. Welcome to Season 3 of Jay's Watch. Join me with my friends. Movie fan from the movie universe, Alpha Lion Simba, Bonnie from Joy Unicycle, and my new friend, Rabbit Ears Blog. Say hi guys!
Hey guys! What's up? Alpha Lion Simba here.
Hey guys, movie fan here.
Hi everybody, it's me again.
Hey everyone, this is Rabbit Ears Blog.
So what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to review Marvel films as a tribute in honor of the great late Marvel comic book legend Stan Lee, who passed away a few months ago. We all missed him because he is the legend. He's the man who created such superheroes for fans all over the world.
I honestly think that sounds like a marvelous plan. Let's do it.
I'll be honest, I was not that big of a fan of Marvel growing up since I was more a DC kid, but I have seen a few Marvel stuff, which was actually quite decent, so I figured I'd oblige.
You could call me a wild card when it comes to this because I was always a fan of Marvel and DC. And I've had the greatest respect for Stan Lee. He truly was the greatest. If it weren't for him, there wouldn't be any of those legendary Marvel Comics characters. Or Marvel, for that matter. So, of course, I had to get in on this.
Well, my friends, without further ado, let's get started. Today's Marvel movie review, we're going to talk about Spider-Man, the best superhero Marvel film that ever come out in 2002. On the 3rd of May in 2002, Spider-Man swung onto the big screen and crawled its way to the box office, making $821.7 million worldwide. It became a critical and financial success. It was the first film to reach $100 million in a single weekend and became the most successful film based on a comic book. And when I first saw this movie on VHS, I thought it was awesome. And after rewatching it for a few times, I love this movie. Now, before we discuss this film, I think it's time to let Movie Fan to talk about the creation of this character. Movie Fan, do the honors.
Thank you, Jonathan. In order to do that, we'll have to start all the way from the beginning. Starting back in 1962, when Spider-Man first debuted in Amazing Fantasy Comic Books, issue number 15. And as everyone knows, he was created by the legendary Stan Lee. Spider-Man became an instant success because he was a relatable character, almost as relatable as Batman was in a way. Even though he does have superpowers, he was a teenager when he started, and that was a very radical new idea for the time, because usually all superheroes are adults. Even Batman was an adult when he first became Batman. But Spider-Man was a character that teenagers could look up to because, for once, they're getting the spotlight here. That's one of the things that made this comic so successful.
Absolutely, Movie Fan. The character became so popular that back in the 60s, it got its own animated series featuring one of the most iconic theme songs in history. I mean, listen to this!
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud. He's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man. In the chill of night, at the scene of a crime, like a streak of light, he arrives just in time. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Wealth and fame, he's ignored. Action is his reward to him. Life is a great big hang-up. Wherever there's a hang-up, you'll find a Spider-Man.
Yes, indeed. And here's an interesting fact for you. This song was actually featured in the soundtrack for the first film. And that should show you how iconic this song really is. This series went on from 1967 all the way to 1970, giving this series a 3-year run. Of course, that wasn't the end of Spider-Man on the television. Oh no, it was only the beginning. Because in 1977, they created the first live-action TV series of Spider-Man, entitled The Amazing Spider-Man, after the comic book, of course. This series ran for only 2 seasons, from 1977 all the way to 79, and it does have some corny moments. I mean, if you look at the web shooter, it looks like a mini satellite dish hanging on his wrist. The way it all plays off, it's, well, let's just say it's stereotypical 1970s. But given what they had to work with at the time, this wasn't half bad. And that was a very ambitious move for them to try to make a live-action version. And it seemed to have paid off because in 1978, Toei Studios bought the rights to use the character of Spider-Man for their own live-action TV show. And if the name Toei means anything to you, you would know them better as the guys who created the Super Sentai TV series. And there's actually an interesting story behind this part. Back in the 70s, Stan Lee and Toei Productions drew up a licensing agreement. This agreement would allow both Toei and Marvel to basically use their characters any which way they wanted. Japan got Spider-Man, who they turned into a motocross racer with some pretty interesting abilities, most notably how he changes into his costume. And we got Super Sentai, which later became Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So Stan Lee is the reason that we have Power Rangers. Next to Saban, of course. But I'll tell you this, if it wasn't for Stan Lee's agreement with Toei, we probably wouldn't have it. The Japanese version of Spider-Man only lasted for 1 year. Then in 1981, they made another animated series called Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Most people would probably know this one because in this version, he is teaming up with all kinds of superheroes, like Thor, the X-Men, Captain America, you name it, he teams up with them in this. The show ran for only 3 years, from 1981 all the way to 1983. However, it was in syndication until 1986, and after that for over a decade, there was no Spider-Man, until 1994 when we get Spider-Man, the animated series. This is the one that I'm most familiar with because I grew up with this series. It was on Fox Kids for the longest time. It only lasted for 4 years, from 1994 all the way to 1998. But even after the show ended, they were still playing it because it was that popular. It featured some of the most amazing animation for the time. And of course, it had all of his greatest villains like the Lizard, Scorpion, and Venom, to name a few. It was even one of the first animated TV shows to use CGI in it, because if you take a good look at the buildings that he's swinging through, they're clearly made out of CGI. And that's how they used it. They used the CGI for some of the background, but they used the pure pen and ink animation for the characters. And even today, it is the best version of Spider-Man out there. Then in 1999, Fox Kids introduced Spider-Man Unlimited, based off the futuristic comic book series Spider-Man 2099. It followed the trend of futuristic shows going on back at that time because the year 2000 was going to be rolling around, and everyone was looking forward to a bright and shiny future. So Spider-Man got with the times. Of course, the show only lasted for 3 years, from 99 all the way to 2001. It wasn't as popular as the legendary animated series was. Which brings us to the 2002 film Spider-Man. However, it didn't necessarily start in 2002. As some people are not aware, they actually tried for a number of years to bring Spider-Man to the big screen. For this, I'll be turning to Jonathan. Take it away.
It all started when Canon Films had picked up Captain America and Spider-Man, but also Superman. Canon Films had started pre-production on Spider-Man with director Joe Zito, but during the late 80s, Canon Films were struggling with their finances resulting from too many box office bombs. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, failed due to heavy budget cuts. Spider-Man's budget was then slashed from $20 million to $7 million, which was resulting Joe Zito leaving the project. Director Albert Pian was given the task, but it was never got to use the shooting stage as Canon needed to save money, and so the production was cancelled. Later on, 21st Century Films was still pursuing the idea of a Spider-Man movie. A number of scripts were written but never got produced. James Cameron, who directed Aliens and Terminator 2, had wanted to develop a Spider-Man movie, but didn't own the rights. Kuroko Pictures, who produced Terminator 2 Judgment Day, had an arrangement with 21st Century Films to share distribution, and James Cameron had developed a large 47-page treatment, which focused on the villains such as Doc Ock and Sandman. Doc Ock was supposed to be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator films, while Spider-Man was going to be played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and get ready for this, J. Jonah Jameson was going to be played by none other than Stan Lee himself. James Cameron even introduced the idea of the organic web shooters, so instead of creating the webs himself, it came out of his risks. which was used in Sam Raimi's entire trilogy of Spider-Man. So you're probably wondering why James Cameron's Spider-Man did not happen. I'll let Movie Fan explain. Take it away, Movie Fan.
Well, there were two reasons that it fell through. The first was that Marvel and Carico Productions filed for bankruptcy. The second reason was, well, there was a huge legal battle going over who owned the rights to Spider-Man. James Cameron tried to convince 20th Century Fox to buy the rights, but they did not want to spend the money for legal fees. And so, it fell through. And it's really quite sad because James Cameron could have really made it work. Let's not forget, this is the man that gave us Terminator 2, the greatest sequel in movie history. But at the same time, maybe it was for the best because CG was only barely getting started, so maybe it would have been a flop. That's something we will never know. But of course, the problems didn't just end with James Cameron. In fact, when they were working on Spider-Man, they did have some problems along the way. One big problem was finding the right director for the job. Sony Pictures had a lot of options to consider. They had Tony Scott, Chris Columbus, Ang Lee, and even M. Night Shyamalan. Thank God they didn't choose him. In the end, they chosen Sam Raimi because he was a huge fan of Spider-Man. And because back in 1990 he created his own superhero, Darkman. But it really was because he was passionate about Spider-Man. So the studio felt that he was the right choice for the job. The other problem was 9/11. As I'm sure we all remember, before the movie premiered, there were teaser posters of Spider-Man's face with the World Trade Center being reflected in his eyes. And, of course, there was the famous teaser trailer where bank robbers are flying away in a helicopter. Then all of a sudden, their helicopter stops and is pulled back. And then we just get this beautiful scene where the helicopter is in a huge spider web that is right between the World Trade Center. It was by far one of the best teasers that I had ever seen, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one to say this. They planned on using this as Spider-Man's big entrance to the people of New York, but sadly, because of 9/11, they had to cut that out, and they had to remove the posters as well.
Now that we did the history lesson, let's talk about the movie.
Spider-Man, you pretty much all know the plot by now, whether you've read the comics, seen the cartoons, or seen all the movies that have come out about him by now. You pretty much would know what Spider-Man 1 is about.
That's true, Bonnie. Most people do know what Spider-Man's all about, but there's always that select few that are so far behind in the subject, especially with all the new movies coming out. I'm pretty sure nobody ever bothered to watch the original films. So I think we need to touch base on that. For this, I think we should leave it to our new friend Rabbit Ears blog. Take it away, Rabbit Ears.
So, what this movie is all about is that it's about Peter Parker starting out as a regular teenager, and then one day he gets bitten by the radioactive spider and he ends up getting powers. And then one night his Uncle Ben ends up getting shot by a robber. And it was at that point that Peter Parker starts thinking about his saying, with great power comes great responsibility, and he decides to become Spider-Man at that point. And then meanwhile, Norman Osborn ends up getting into a lab accident, which ends up turning him into the Green Goblin. And he doesn't know that Peter Parker, his son's Harry Osborn's best friend, is actually Spider-Man, and he spends most of the movie trying to get at Spider-Man.
That's the basic plot. Now, if you want to see how it turns out, in the words of my friend Jonathan, you're going to have to look it up for yourself. But of course, that doesn't mean that we can't talk about his abilities. What are his abilities, Bonnie?
He could climb on walls, he could shoot webs out of his body, and which also includes his spidey sense, which involves him being able to see far off and feel things from a distance, so he could tell when there's trouble coming.
And now it's time for us to tell you about the cast. First off, we got Tobey Maguire as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He is believable as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He captures the character. To prepare the role, Maguire did a lot of training. He did physical exercise, yoga, and took rock climbing. And to my opinion, he is the best actor to have ever played the role of the character. No one can play both Peter Parker and Spider-Man the way he did. What do you think, guys?
Me, I'll always be a sucker for the actor who voiced him back in the 1990s animated series. But Tobey Maguire did a pretty decent job. He was believable when he first got his spider powers, which is truly one of the best scenes, especially where they slow down everything while he's studying his spider sense during that big fight in the cafeteria. That is, if you can call that a fight. And I especially love when he tries to use his webbing for the first time ever, which was a real improvement compared to the comic books. Yes, I know, everyone prefers that he has web shooters that he builds, but you know what? It made no sense to me that he gets these spider powers and yet he cannot shoot webs. Everyone always says, oh, but when he builds the web shooters, that shows how intelligent he is. Yeah, sure, it does. But you know what? That's virtually meaningless. He also does strategies. He comes up with plans. He thinks on his feet. Does that not show intelligence? Bottom line, I prefer him to make his own webbing instead of building web shooters to do it. To me, that was always a big mistake in the comic books. They should have done it right the first time by having him automatically shoot webs. Getting back on track, when he's trying to learn how to use his web, that's pretty awesome. And in a way, it's almost a shout out to Superman because he says up, up, and away when he does it one time. And I got to admire anyone who tries to train this extensively for a role such as Spider-Man. And it makes perfect sense that he would take up rock climbing since Spider-Man crawls up walls.
I actually think Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man was pitch perfect. He looked the part, he behaved the part, and yeah, he definitely captured the geeky side of Spider-Man, though on occasion he could be very much ready to kick butt. That's just how good of an actor he is.
I agree, guys, and to my opinion, he became Spider-Man. Next up, we got Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, the girl that Peter had a crush on since he was 6 years old. I believe she did a good job as the role. She captures the character development of her. Kirsten Dunst made a good performance as Mary Jane Watson.
I think so too. Separately, they did all right, but when you got them together, there actually is some chemistry going on here. What do you think, Rabbit Ears?
I thought they did pretty okay with portraying Peter Parker and Mary Jane, but I felt like they could have done a little better with these characters. Like, I felt like Tobey Maguire could have been a little more like a jokey character, like Spider-Man normally is portraying the comics. And I think that Kirsten Dunst could have had a little more personality when she was playing as Mary Jane. But I thought they did okay with the material they were given.
I thought Tobey Maguire did all right as Spider-Man. He gave us that believable nerd feeling, although I will admit he really should have been a little more confident after he had gotten his spider powers. Kirsten Dunst was okay. I can't really say too much about her, that's a sad thing. She just comes off as that pretty little redhead who's in the movie. So, yeah, maybe she could have used a little more character development than what we were given. But that's not her fault either. You can blame the writers for that one. I will not deny that when Tobey Maguire is playing Spider-Man, he should be doing more wisecracks like the character did in the comics, as well as the TV shows. But as we all know, when it comes to movies, they always take an artistic license on the characters, the character development, and all that other stuff. So I can't complain about that too much. Plus, if you look at his character as Peter Parker, he doesn't really come off as the type who gives out a whole bunch of wisecracks. So for him to be just this normal nerdy character, then all of a sudden he's Spider-Man giving a whole bunch of wisecracks, that's a huge leap. So I could see why they didn't do that. That kind of character development, it's not a two-way street. It's one way or the other. That's just the way it is.
Next, we got Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, owner of the Oscorp Industries, who later became the Green Goblin, the main villain of the film. He is fantastic as the Green Goblin. He is, to my opinion, the best choice to play the role of the Green Goblin. When I first saw him in this movie, he was scary, and is believable. Say what you want about this suit, keep on saying that his suit looked like more like a Power Rangers villain, but at least it's like the comic book compared to the comic book counterpart.
That's true, because he does have the glider that shoots a whole bunch of missiles. And actually, I do like the armor myself. Sure, in the comics, he's supposed to look more like a court jester with a purple suit and a green face. Well, green mask, actually. But let's not forget, the idea was that it's supposed to be a military weapon, so it makes perfect sense that he would have armor instead of just a costume. And I'll tell you this, I love when William Dafoe is arguing with his Norman Osborn and Green Goblin sides. It is truly amazing. It shows you what a good actor he really is, because that's not an easy thing to do.
I agree, movie fan. He looks menacing as the Green Goblin. And it's funny that people kept on saying that this Green Goblin looks like more of a Power Rangers villain. Even that he looks kind of like it, I still love this costume for what it is. Interesting enough, there was a test footage of what the Green Goblin's mask was originally going to be like. It's a mixture between animatronics and makeup, and looks exactly like the comic book's counterpart and looks super creepy. But due to that Willem Dafoe felt uncomfortable with this mask, it was not used in the film. It's a shame because this mask looks exactly like it was in the comics. I would have loved to see that on screen. But as for the mask that Willem Dafoe was using, it's good enough. And despite all of that, this costume of the Green Goblin is very fantastic. And I'm going to say it again. This costume of the Green Goblin is straight out from the comic books.
I also like Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, even if he does go all Jekyll and Hyde hammy. Admit it. How many of you ever got through one scene with the Green Goblin without laughing, at least? But then again, you know Willem Dafoe does a great performance despite whatever he's been given. Whether it's the script or the costume, good grief, have you seen that costume? And the other designs for the costume?
We also got James Franco as Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend and Norman's son. He made a good performance. And fun fact, James Franco was originally going to play the role of Spider-Man, but after the screen test, Sam Raimi believes that he's better to play the role of Harry.
I could see why, because Harry was a pretty complicated character. I mean, first his dad was the Green Goblin, and then eventually he becomes the Green Goblin because of his dad. And let's not forget the fact that he was interested in Mary Jane as well, which was one of the main driving forces in the comic books and the animated series as to why he became the second Green Goblin.
Next, we got Rosemary Harris as Aunt May Parker. She is now 91 years old. She made a beautifully made performance as Aunt May. She captures of who Aunt May was in the comics. Caring, loving, and very supportive towards Peter. There was also Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben Parker. And I gotta say, he is believable as Ben Parker. Especially when he said the most iconic line in history. That with great power comes great responsibility. And his line was so memorable that his voice of the line was even used in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And also, he later appeared on in Spider-Man 2 and in Spider-Man 3, which happens to be his last and final on-screen role, because after that, Cliff Robertson had passed away in 2011. It's a real shame that we lost him, because no one can play Uncle Ben Parker the way he did. What do you think, movie fan?
I think he was one of the best characters in this whole movie. Even though he had such a short period of time, he really became the driving force as to why Peter becomes Spider-Man. Many people have said with great power comes great responsibility over the years, but he nailed that line.
I agree. Also, we got J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, the grumpy and short-tempered owner of the Daily Bugle. He stole the show as JJ. And if you think Ed Asner, who played JJ from Spider-Man the Animated Series from the 90s, is the best, you got it wrong. This is the best JJ ever. And J.K. Simmons nailed it perfectly. Having J.K. Simmons as JJ is the best casting choice ever in Marvel history. He became J. Jonah Jameson.
I wouldn't undercut Ed Asner as Jameson because he played that role really well back in the 90s. But J.K. Simmons, the look was perfect. The attitude was excellent. It was straight out of the comic books. That's how Jameson really was. Every now and again, you find that one actor that can play that one character so perfectly that nobody, and I mean nobody, could replace him if they tried. J.K. Simmons as Jonah Jameson is proof of that, because he didn't just play Jameson, he became him.
Ah, yes. J. Jonah Jameson. You cannot go wrong with this guy. Oh gosh. This is the kind of character I either love to laugh at or very much want to punch. When you create a character like that, that is just perfect. It was like he was born to play this role.
I agree with you guys. J.K. Simmons nailed J. Jonah Jameson perfectly. Also, to let you know, there are a few celebrities that make a cameo. First off, we got Sam Raimi's collaborator from the Evil Dead films, Bruce Campbell, as the ring announcer who gives the name of Spider-Man. There was also the late Macho Man Randy Savage as the wrestler Bonesaw. who's been beaten by Spider-Man in the wrestling match. There was also Ted Raimi, Sam's younger brother, as Jameson's assistant, Hoffman. There was also Octavia Spencer, who played the check-in girl from the scene of the ring match. And finally, we got the late great Stan Lee in a cameo as the Man in the Fair. And so you're probably wondering, what do we think of this movie? Well, I'm gonna let my collaborators go first. Take it away.
For the most part, I actually think Spider-Man 1 is very, very good. It has a flowing narrative and translates well from a comic book into a live movie, even though some of the effects are pretty campy and cheesy, and it looks a lot of the time like a video game rather than the actual characters. But for the most part, I think it's really good. The characters are well established. They're not perfect characters. Their situations are understandable and identifiable. And also, Peter Parker has a way of making you believe that Spider-Man could be real. And that's one of the things I've loved about some of the Marvel comics, or at least the Marvel comic movies. They make you feel like these characters could exist. They were relatable. They were realistic for the most part. I don't know how the comics were, but that's just how good they were. And for the most part, the fight scenes were pretty well choreographed for the budget that they had. And I say for the budget they had. Even though some of the fights look like it came from a Power Rangers episode.
Hey!
Okay, what I meant to say was they look more like a Six Flags stunt show. But for the most part, it conveys what it needs to convey. The situation, the atmosphere, what the characters on both sides are going through. That's what I've always loved it for. The structure, story, and characters. Though, has anybody ever counted how many times Mary Jane Watson gets kidnapped in this movie? And count all the screams that she has. I actually remember my little sister saying, her screams are so annoying.
I'm not going to argue with that one, Bonnie, because there are quite a few times where Mary Jane gets kidnapped, but that seems to be her profile. She's the damsel in distress. But, that has been overused in so many movies, I will not deny it. And as for her screams being annoying, you should have your little sister watch Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and put up with the main actress, and I'm using very big air quotes on that one, because every 5 seconds with her it's Indy! And I think we all know who holds the world record for screaming. Fay Wray in the movie King Kong, because she screams almost every second. But let's get back on track. What did you think of this movie, Rabbit Ears?
I thought this movie was pretty decent. I mean, it's obvious that this movie was like in the early stages of superhero movies, so they didn't quite develop the characters as well as they do nowadays. But yeah, I think this movie did a pretty decent job in at least establishing Peter Parker and Mary Jane as characters and giving us an insight about Spider-Man in general, and actually try to give us a story with the web slinger instead of being like a stereotypical superhero movie that doesn't have any depth into it. I always felt like Spider-Man 2002 was one of the first superhero movies that has a lot more depth to the story. Well, X-Men came before it, but it was one of the superhero movies that had a lot of depth to it.
Me, I think it goes without saying, but I'll tell you anyway. I loved this movie. The story was very well told. In fact, I thought there was a lot of great depth in this story. I felt they really captured what Spider-Man was truly all about. From how he got his spider powers to his big epiphany where he realizes that if he had stopped that guy at the wrestling arena, his uncle would be alive right now. And of course, I cannot forget Uncle Ben's big line, with great power comes great responsibility. That is straight out of the comic, and that still rings true to this day. And what's even better is that when they made this movie, Sam Raimi decided to go with the proper costume. Sure, Spider-Man has had different looks over the years, but this is the costume that everyone's familiar with. It's red, it's blue, the big wide eyes, the webbing within the red. It's absolutely perfect. This is classic Spider-Man. This is what everyone was hoping for. There were other films that came before this, such as X-Men, where they decided to make them all wear black leather for some reason. I guess it all comes down to the theory that they probably thought that it would not translate well into the movies, a lot like a certain movie that we will not talk about. But either way, that's understandable why they thought that wouldn't work. The problem is, X-Men were so iconic with their yellow spandex and their blue uniforms and their white get-ups and stuff like that. The same goes with Spider-Man. He is iconic for his red and blue costume. There isn't a person alive who does not know this costume. And that's what made this so good, was that Sam Raimi decided to not go with the black leather outfit. Instead, he gave us the costume that we all wanted. It shows you how much of a fan he was of Spider-Man, because if he never read the comics, he wouldn't have done it like this. This is proof that when Sony Pictures chose Sam Raimi as their director, they made the right choice. Now granted, he did take an artistic license here and there. That's what you'd expect out of a director. But he kept the central core of the story, as well as the look, just what it was supposed to be. And I think we can all agree on that.
Definitely. As for my opinion, I'm going to say this. Out of all the Spider-Man movies that we've seen on screen, this is without doubt the best Spider-Man movie ever, and it's my absolute favorite Spider-Man movie and my favorite Marvel movie of all time. The special effects are pretty good, especially for moments when Spider-Man climb walls or Spider-Man shooting webs and swing through the city. And of course you must know, the special effects was made by John Dykstra himself. And also, Dykstra and his team were very careful of how they used it with the cast. Due to Spider-Man's suit being red and blue, they used green screen. And due to Green Goblin's costume being green, they used blue screen. For me, the fight scenes are really amazing. Not to mention, they're well choreographed and very well edited. For instance, in one scene when Spider-Man was fighting against the Green Goblin in a burning building, they used a little bit of slow motion in this scene. And the way how they use it is very well done. The costumes are also very well done. First off, I love the design of Spider-Man's suit. It looks exactly like we all know from the comics. Not to mention, the detail of the suit is very well made, and it's so excellent how the costume designers made it. And so I'm going to say it again. Spider-Man's suit in this movie is very well done, and it is straight from the comics. As for the Green Goblin's suit, it is very well done to my opinion. You may say that he looks silly or he's more like a Power Rangers villain, but I don't mind about that one. For instance, one, at least that it's more like the comic books than what we got. As much as I love the Green Goblin from the comics, the look of it does seem kinda cheesy. And second, because I love Power Rangers. Though I could imagine what would look like if Spider-Man teamed up with Power Rangers so they can defeat Rita Repulsa, Lord Zed, Goldar, Green Goblin, and other Spider-Man villains. That is one of the team-ups that I would love to see. There was also the music score by Danny Elfman, and he did so phenomenal. He made the best superhero movie score ever since Batman back in 1989. His music really captures the tone and the drama of the movie, and it's worth listening to. This is one of my favorite superhero movie scores ever. What do you think, movie fan?
I think it's some of his best work. Now granted, Danny Elfman's music has been accused of being very generic, but let's get real, people. Most superhero movie themes are extremely generic. Danny Elfman managed to create something different, and for that time, this was very new. The music blends in with the movie at just the right points, like when Spider-Man's starting to realize his powers and tries climbing up the wall for the first time. It's got a soft, mysterious kind of tone, and then it starts building up to as he's crawling up the wall, and then he's jumping over the rooftops, and then at just the right moment it stops when he's trying to figure out his webbing. With the music working with that scene, it's like Tobey Maguire broke the tempo. Now that is how you make music work with a movie. Wouldn't you agree, Jonathan?
I agree. This score is worth listening to. Same thing for the soundtrack, featuring great songs such as Hero performed by Nickelback and What We're All About performed by Sum 41. If you don't have these two soundtracks of Spider-Man, then we highly recommend you to pick them up because, again, these soundtracks is worth listening. Especially if you love the music of Danny Elfman.
What do I think of this movie? Well, it was actually pretty good. Well, I liked the sets a lot. It looked very phenomenal. The special effects were spot on. Like, I loved the suit that they gave for Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. The suit for Spider-Man perfectly matches the iconic look that we've come to expect from the character, and the Green Goblin looked very, very menacing. A kind of guy I would not want to mess with. In terms of the acting and the characters, Tobey Maguire, for the most part, was actually pretty well suited to play Spider-Man. I mean, he gave a great amount of charm, and he managed to capture the stereotypical, well, not stereotypical, but teenage character who has to learn that, to quote Ben, great power comes with great responsibility, but does learn his lesson in the end. I did have to pick one problem regarding the acting. It would be Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson. I mean, she did fine. I mean, she did very well with what she had to work with, but couldn't they have gotten a natural redhead to portray the character? But honestly, that's just a nitpick.
Don't forget, you're not the only one, Alpha.
Now, in terms of the script, I'm kind of a mixed bag about the script. For one thing, there are a lot of subplots in this. They can be interesting for the most part, but it never got to the point where it was too complicated for me. No, I could follow the movie just fine. And some of the pacing can be kind of off. There's some scenes that really drag. I start to lose interest. But overall with this film, I do like it. It had great acting, had some decent special effects, and some really good acting from Tobey Maguire. And while, again, not a natural redhead, Kirsten Dunst did do a good job. In my book, I give Sam Raimi's Spider-Man probably an 8 out of 10.
Overall, I give Spider-Man 2002 a 4 out of 5. It is a lot more in depth with the storyline than most of the superhero movies that came out at the time. But I felt like they could have done a little better with some of the characters. Like, I think they could have made Spider-Man to a more jokey character, and they could have made Mary Jane a little more excited or have more personality. But I thought this movie did okay with what the material was being given, and it was one of the early stages of the superhero movies that tried to give more depth with the movies. But yeah, overall, I give Spider-Man 2002 a 4 out of 5.
I gave it 10 stars, mostly because Sam Raimi did follow what Spider-Man was all about very closely. And like I said about Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, they gave it their best shot, and I think they did all right. But William Dafoe really outdid himself as the Green Goblin, and there's no denying Jonah Jameson was absolutely perfect. Plus, the action was absolutely amazing.
This is all the way 5 stars. Sorry, Roger Ebert. I know the effects were cheesy, but the effects don't make a movie unless they allow it to. And here, the writers make sure that the effects don't make the movie. The effects may look campy, but you know what? The comics were kind of campy, but not entirely. Enough said. Spider-Man 1, 5 stars, yes.
Overall, Spider-Man from 2002 is a very phenomenal Marvel superhero movie. The cast is very well played as the characters, the story, action scenes, special effects, and costumes are amazing and also stay true to the source material of the comics. The music by Danny Elfman is so memorable, and Sam Raimi did a really spectacular job directing the movie. This movie is so awesome that it holds a place in my heart as not just my favorite Marvel movie, it is my #1 favorite Spider-Man movie ever. So all I can say is that out of all the Spider-Man movies in the world, this movie is definitely the best to watch. And also, this movie is the best introduction to Peter Parker and how he became Spider-Man. So as a result, I give Spider-Man from 2002 5 gold stars. And not just that, I'm also going to give 2 thumbs up, A+, gold medal, and 10 out of 10. Well, that's all for our movie review of Spider-Man from 2002. I would love to thank Movie Fan from the Movie Universe, Bonnie from Joy Unicycle, Alpha Lion Simba, and Rabbit Ears Blog for joining me on this special review.
Thanks you guys for letting me tag along, and I look forward to the next time we can review more Marvel movies.
I'm always glad to make these videos with you guys, and I had fun working with Rabbit Ears Blog, and I hope to make more videos with you guys in the near future.
I'd like to thank Mr. J's Watch and Movie Fan. Thanks you guys for coming over and doing this review with me.
I'd like to thank Movie Fan, Jonathan, and Bonnie for inviting me.
So this is Rabbit Ears Blog, and I'll see you later.
Until then, this is Bonnie from Joy Unicycles saying see you soon.
Alpha Lion Simba, out.
And as always, this is Movie Fan, signing off.
Stay tuned because my collaborator and I are going to review another Marvel movie, and that is Daredevil from 2003. In the meantime, I'm Jonathan the reviewer, this is Jay's Watch, and we will see you next time.